I watched my father's perfect new wife read the emails on her iPad, her face draining of color like someone had pulled a plug. His golden children, the ones he chose over me, stared at the evidence of who their father really was, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt something close to peace. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story starts when I was 12 years old, sitting on our worn-out couch, learning that I wasn't good enough to keep. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Claire, I'm 27 now, and I need you to understand something. I wasn't always this cold. I used to be the kind of daughter who made excuses for everything. The kind who twisted herself into knots trying to understand why her father kept choosing everyone else over her. But that day at his birthday party, something inside me finally broke, and I stopped making excuses for a man who had erased me from his life like I was a rough draft he'd thrown away. It started on a Tuesday afternoon when I was 12. Dad sat me down in our living room, and I remember thinking how weird it was that he looked nervous. Dads weren't supposed to be nervous. He cleared his throat 3 times before he finally said it. He was leaving. He'd met someone new, someone named Denise, and he needed a fresh start. I remember him using those exact words. Fresh start. Like our family was a stale loaf of bread he was throwing out. He promised me nothing would change, that he'd still be my dad, that we'd still see each other all the time. In the next room, I could hear my mother crying, trying to muffle the sound with a pillow. I was 12 years old, and I believed every word he said. For the first few months, he kept his promises. Every Saturday, he'd pick me up and we'd go get ice cream or see a movie. He'd ask about school, help me with homework, tell me he loved me. I held on to those Saturdays like they were lifelines. Then Denise got pregnant, and the Saturdays became every other Saturday. He was tired, he said. Denise needed him. I understood. I was 12, then 13, then 14, and I understood everything because the alternative was admitting that I was losing him. When the twins were born, Tyler and Clara, the every other Saturdays became once a month, then every 6 weeks, then whenever he could fit me in. Each cancellation came with a reason that made perfect sense. The twins were sick. Denise needed help. Tyler had a doctor's appointment. Clara wasn't sleeping. Work was crazy. Money was tight. I collected his excuses like precious stones, examining each one, finding the logic in them, using them to explain to my mother why he'd cancelled again, using them to explain to my friends why my dad wasn't at my 8th grade graduation. He'd texted that morning, emergency with the twins. I told everyone he was stuck at the hospital. I even believed it myself. My mother worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat because the child support checks came whenever Dad remembered to send them. I wore thrift store clothes and pretended I liked the vintage look while scrolling through Dad's Facebook, seeing Tyler and Clara in their designer outfits, on vacation in Hawaii, at Disneyland, on a boat Dad had bought. A boat. My school shoes had holes in them, but Dad had bought a boat. When I mentioned college, he sighed and said money was tight, that he was doing his best, that he couldn't afford to help. I nodded and applied for student loans, working full-time while going to school full-time, watching my body run on coffee and 3 hours of sleep. Meanwhile, Tyler and Clara went to private school. They got horses. Actual horses. I kept trying though. God, I kept trying. I'd text him first, always first. Hey Dad, how are you? Miss you. Thinking of you. Sometimes he'd respond days later with a thumbs up emoji. Sometimes he wouldn't respond at all. I'd call on his birthday, on holidays, sending cards and gifts I couldn't afford. I told myself he was busy. He had a whole new family to manage. I was an adult now, I shouldn't need him so much. I shouldn't be so needy, so clingy, so desperate for crumbs of attention from a man who'd clearly moved on. My mother would watch me do this to myself, and sometimes I'd catch her crying. She'd beg me to stop chasing someone who didn't want to be caught, but I couldn't stop. Because stopping meant admitting the truth, and I wasn't ready for that truth yet. I was 25, working as a paralegal, drowning in student loan debt, when I got the Facebook message from Denise. It was cheery and bright, full of exclamation points. They were throwing a big celebration for Dad's 50th birthday, and it would mean so much if I could come. I was part of the family too, after all. I stared at that message for an hour. Part of the family. When was the last time I'd felt like part of anything involving my father? But that little 12-year-old girl inside me, the one who still believed in Saturday ice cream trips, whispered that maybe this was my chance. Maybe if I showed up, if I tried harder, if I was better, he'd finally see me again. So I said yes. I bought a new dress I couldn't afford. I picked out an expensive gift. I practiced what I'd say to him, how I'd act natural and not needy, how I'd show him I'd turned out okay despite everything. I drove to his house, the huge, beautiful house he'd bought after leaving us, with hope sitting in my chest like a bird trying to take flight. I had no idea I was walking into the moment that would finally kill that hope forever. That night would be the last time I ever made excuses for Robert Fletcher, the man who used to be my dad. The house looked like something out of a magazine. That was my first thought pulling up to Dad's place. My second thought was that my mother had lived in the same cramped apartment for 15 years while he'd been building this palace. The driveway was lined with luxury cars, the lawn was perfect, and through the windows I could see chandeliers. Actual chandeliers. I sat in my beat-up Honda for 5 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, telling myself I belonged here. I was his daughter. I had every right to be at his birthday party. Denise opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and she hugged me like we were strangers forced to pretend at intimacy. "Claire, so glad you could make it." Her voice was too loud, too bright. She ushered me inside where the house was packed with people I didn't know. The twins were by the staircase, 15 now, practically adults. I waved at them. Tyler glanced at me and looked away. Clara didn't even acknowledge I existed. Something twisted in my stomach. "Everyone, this is Claire," Denise announced to a group of women in the kitchen. "Robert's daughter from before. From before." Like I was a relic from some prehistoric era he'd evolved past. The women smiled politely and turned back to their conversation about vacation homes. I stood there for a moment, invisible, before moving toward the living room where I could see Dad holding court with a crowd of men, probably talking about golf or stocks or whatever successful people talked about. He saw me and gave a little wave, mouthing later before turning back to his conversation. "I'd driven an hour to be here and I got a wave." Dinner was called, and I watched everyone flow toward this enormous dining room table that could seat 20 people. The immediate family, Dad, Denise, Tyler, Clara, took the center seats. The important seats. I stood there with my gift, waiting for someone to tell me where to sit, and Denise pointed toward a folding table that had been set up near the hallway. "You're over there, sweetie." We ran out of room at the main table. I was at the kids' table. 25 years old with a law degree I'd worked myself half to death for, and I was sitting with Dad's second cousin's children who kept kicking each other under the table. From my seat, I had a perfect view of Dad with his real family. I watched him laugh with Tyler, ruffle Clara's hair, kiss Denise's cheek. He was so present with them, so engaged. I tried to remember the last time he'd looked at me like that and came up empty. Someone at the main table was talking about Tyler's soccer scholarship, and Dad was beaming, telling everyone how proud he was. He'd never asked about my scholarship, never asked about my job, never asked about anything. Then came the slideshow. Denise dimmed the lights and pulled up this presentation on a huge screen: Robert's life in pictures. I watched, frozen, as photo after photo played. Dad as a young man, Dad and Denise's wedding, the twins as babies, family vacations, Christmas mornings, birthday parties, soccer games, dance recitals, graduations from middle school. The life I'd been cut out of played before me in high definition, and there wasn't a single picture of me. Not one. 15 years of my life with him, and I'd been completely erased. When the lights came back on, everyone was dabbing their eyes and talking about what a beautiful family Dad had. I felt like I was disappearing, molecule by molecule. The speeches started. Tyler went first, standing with a confidence I'd never possessed at 15. "My dad is the best father anyone could ask for. He's never missed a single game, never been too busy to help with homework, never let me down. He taught me that family is everything, that you show up for the people you love." Every word was a hammer blow. He'd missed everything of mine. Everything. Clara went next, talking about how Dad had taught her that family comes first, that you protect the people who matter. I dug my nails into my palms so hard I drew blood. Then Denise stood up, and I knew before she opened her mouth that whatever came next was going to destroy me. "I want to toast my husband," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "Robert is an incredible man who learned from his past mistakes. His first marriage was really just practice. This is the real thing. This is his real family, the life he was meant to have." The room erupted in laughter. Dad was laughing. His mother, my grandmother, was nodding like Denise had just said something profound. I was the mistake, the practice round, the rough draft of a life he'd perfected without me. Something inside me cracked. I stood up, my chair scraping loud against the hardwood floor. Everyone looked at me. "Dad," my voice came out shaky, "can I talk to you?" He looked annoyed, like I was a telemarketer interrupting dinner. "Can it wait, Claire? This isn't really the time." But I couldn't wait. 15 years of waiting had brought me here, to this moment, being erased at a folding table. "You didn't put any pictures of me in your slideshow." He waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, I didn't have many from back then. Don't be so sensitive, this is about celebrating now, not dwelling on the past." Dwelling on the past. I was the past. Denise touched his arm, her voice sickly sweet. "Honey, your guests are waiting." And just like that, he turned away from me. Walked away like I was nothing. Across the room, I heard Clara whisper to Tyler, "So dramatic," and they both laughed. The same laugh their father had laughed at Denise's speech about me being practice. I left without saying goodbye. Nobody noticed. I sat in my car in that perfect driveway, shaking so hard I couldn't get the key in the ignition. 15 years of excuses evaporated in that moment. 15 years of convincing myself he was just busy, just stressed, just trying his best. He wasn't trying at all. He'd built a whole new life and bricked me out of it, and I'd spent half my life making excuses for the man who'd thrown me away. I was done. Done protecting him. Done shrinking myself. Done being erased. If he wanted to pretend I didn't exist, fine. But his precious new family was going to learn exactly who they'd been celebrating tonight. I started my car and drove home, and for the first time in 15 years, I stopped making excuses for Robert Fletcher. I took 2 weeks off work, telling my boss I had a family emergency. It wasn't a lie. I'd been having a family emergency for 15 years, I just finally decided to do something about it. My apartment became a war room. I spread everything across my living room floor like a detective solving a cold case, except a crime was my own erasure and I had all the evidence. The unopened birthday cards were first. 20 of them, spanning from age 13 to 25. Cards Dad swore he'd mailed, but that never arrived because he'd never sent them. I'd found them years later in a box at my grandmother's house, still sealed, addressed but never stamped. Next came the emails, hundreds of them. Promises to visit that turned into cancellations, each one more creative than the last. I organized them by excuse type: twins are sick, Denise needs help, work emergency, money problems. That last category was particularly interesting when cross-referenced with his Facebook photos from the same time periods. Can't afford to help with college but can afford a ski trip to Aspen. Fascinating. The bank records Mom had kept were damning. Child support was supposed to be $1,500 a month. Some months he paid $500, some months nothing. Meanwhile, his social media showed restaurant checks, concert tickets, shopping sprees. I made spreadsheets because I'm good at my job, and my job taught me how to build an airtight case. Income versus claimed poverty. Promises versus actions. The father he pretended to be versus the father he actually was. Then I found the divorce documents Mom had saved. Dad had hidden assets during the split, a fact my 12-year-old self hadn't understood but my 27-year-old paralegal self understood perfectly. He'd claimed poverty while transferring money into accounts the court never saw. He'd cried about supporting 2 households while making sure his second household got everything and his first got scraps. I pulled his parents' emails next, the ones they'd sent Mom calling me the mistake that ruined Robert's youth, saying I was an anchor around his neck, that he deserved a chance at real happiness. I printed every single one. The photos were what broke me though. Pictures of Dad at Tyler's soccer games on days he'd texted me saying he was too sick to visit. Screenshots of him checking into restaurants on evenings he'd cancelled our dinners claiming he had to work late. And the bank statements showing he'd withdrawn my entire college fund, money my mother had fought for in the divorce, and used it as a down payment on the twins' horses. I had the receipts. All of them. I wrote a letter. Not emotional. I knew better than that. Emotion could be dismissed as bitterness. Facts couldn't. I laid it out like the legal document it essentially was, a timeline of abandonment with evidence attached. Every broken promise, every lie, every choice he made to prioritize them over me. I didn't editorialize. I didn't need to. The truth was ugly enough on its own. I printed 3 identical packets, probably 300 pages each. One for Denise, one for Tyler, one for Clara. I put each in a manila envelope with their name on it and a simple note: I wanted you to know who you're celebrating. I wasn't going to mail them. Too easy for Dad to intercept, to spin, to control the narrative like he'd controlled everything else. I waited until Tuesday afternoon, when I knew he'd be at work. I drove to that magazine Perfect house in broad daylight, wearing my work clothes like armor. Denise answered the door in yoga pants, surprised to see me. I'd never just shown up before, I'd always waited to be invited, to be wanted. "Claire, this is unexpected." She looked confused, maybe a little wary. I smiled, calm, almost cheerful. "I wanted to drop off some family history for the twins. Pictures and stories from Dad's life before you." I held out the envelopes. "It's important they know where they come from, don't you think?" She took them, still confused, probably thinking this was some olive branch after the party. "There's one for you too," I added, handing her the third envelope. "Everyone should know the truth about family." Before she could ask questions, I turned to leave. "Make sure Tyler and Clara read theirs. It's their inheritance too, knowing who their father really is." I walked back to my car, hand steady, heart pounding. I didn't look back. I drove home, blocked all their numbers except Denise's email. I left that one open intentionally because I wanted to see her reaction, and I waited. 2 days of silence. Then Denise's email arrived at 6 in the morning. "We need to talk about what you sent." Cold. Clipped. Furious. I wrote back, "Everything in those packets is documented fact. If you have questions about the truth, ask Robert." Then I blocked her email too. My phone showed 47 missed calls from Dad's number by noon. I didn't answer. He showed up at my apartment that evening, pounding on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw him, red-faced, frantic, nothing like the composed man from the birthday party. "Claire, open this door. You're trying to ruin my life. They'll never understand. You've always been jealous." I recorded every word on my phone, more evidence if I needed it. My neighbors threatened to call the police. He left. The fallout came through my aunt, Dad's sister, who'd always liked my mom. Tyler wouldn't speak to Dad. Clara was in therapy, devastated that the father she'd worshipped had lied about everything, including me. Denise had kicked him out and filed for divorce after discovering he'd been hiding money from her too, just like he'd done to Mom. The twins had confronted him about telling them I was the one who didn't want a relationship, and they were furious. His perfect life was unraveling, thread by thread, truth by truth. I changed my number. Dad's parents tried to reach me through Facebook, calling me cruel and vindictive. I blocked them. I blocked everyone connected to that part of my life. People asked if I felt guilty. Honestly, no. My only regret is that I spent 15 years making excuses for someone who erased me the moment it was convenient. I didn't ruin my father's life. I just stopped letting him rewrite mine. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story or opinions in the comments.